Hi folks, I'm Pagels-Minor. I'm a product and culture strategist supporting Fortune 100 companies, startups, and everyone in between. I'm also co-host of the podcast, The Drops Podcast, activist, and true tried Southerner. Welcome to my page. One of the things I'm most known for is being one of the faces of the Netflix walkout in 2021. You know, it's such an interesting thing because I'm a person who is very loud, who's very passionate, but at the same time, I've always kind of thought of myself as more of the Dick Cheney, the person behind the president, not the person who is the president. But in 2021, all of that changed because I decided to stand up for my coworkers, for transgender people like myself, and for just anyone who's a diverse person who wants to see themselves represented in media. When I was at Netflix, I had the great honor of being a person who was elected to lead both Blackette and Transtar. So these are two employee resource groups that represented, a wide swath of Netflix employees and a wide swath of Netflix employees from different classes, from different racial backgrounds, from different gender backgrounds. And so in 2021, when we decided to kind of organize to combat what we thought was a great mistake by the higher ups at Netflix, a lot of people perceived it as a specific backlash to Dave Chappelle. And that's not really what it was. I'm going to be truthful. I haven't really laughed at a Dave Chappelle joke since the Prince, episode of the Dave Chappelle show. So I'm not necessarily his fan. But I will say that I respect him. I respect what he's done. I respect that he's a Black man who creates other opportunities for other people, because I am a Black person. That's very important. And so the walkout actually was a direct response to how the executives at Netflix responded to this special. It was about the fact that at Netflix is one of those dream companies. So if you are someone who is talented in tech, talented in media, your pinnacle was to go work at Netflix, right? Because if you could make it in Netflix, you could do anything. And so there's like a certain stature, there's a certain commitment, it's a certain agreement that you agree to when you decide to go work at Netflix, because you have expectations of them. They're just tremendously different than how you would feel about other people and other companies. And so when we got there, you talked about these things where it's like you can disagree, but you commit. You talk about great judgment. You talk about doing no harm, about creating opportunities for more people to see different content than anything that's ever existed in the world. And so every single employee, you tacitly agreed to this. And so that's why it wasn't about the special. It wasn't about whether creative freedom should exist, because every Netflix employee knows creative freedom is a core differentiator. So we support that idea. What it was about was, how do we bring people in, right? How do we bring people into this conversation so that we can commit to that other promise, which is we're going to see better content. You're going to see content in places like Turkey, in places like Korea, in places like Portugal, in places like Brazil that would never exist there, because Netflix is the one company in the world that wants to tell better stories and more stories than anyone else. And so we're simply raising our hand and saying, well, why the heck aren't we talking about trans people in a better way? Why? And then once you start talking about trans people, it's like, why aren't you talking about Black people in a better way? Why aren't you showing, people like me from Mississippi, who you would see Black ranchers and Black farmers, and you would actually see these side shacks that still have moonshine there, right? Why aren't you telling those stories if this is what your commitment is? And when we ask that question, instead of having a collegial and respectful conversation, people like Ted Sarandos instead said, these people just don't understand content. They don't understand what we're trying to do here. They're not sophisticated enough to understand what this is. And again, like I said, we are the best employees in the world. We are the best team that's ever been created in the world. That's what we were telling people. And so if you have the best team in the whole world, why can't we have a respectful conversation about what representation looks like? And so the walkout was simply an opportunity for us to tell this company, like, we respect you, we love you, we came here because we thought we were going to join the best tech company in the world, and you're not right now. You're not. And so as a response to that, we are choosing to say and raise up our hands and say, This is unacceptable. And, what's really great is that, across all of Netflix, over 20% of all of Netflix participated in that walkout. There were activists around the world who joined the walkout who did really great things, like Ashley Marie Preston. And so even though I will say that it was disappointing, Netflix's total response to it, we made them for the very first time stand up and be truthful about their intentions, which is really quite to say that maybe we actually don't want the best team in the world. Instead, what we actually potentially want is a bunch of people who will agree with us. And, it's really nice when at least you can show someone's true colors. It's just fascinating as I've, had a year now to kind of think about the Netflix situation. What would I do differently if I had been in Netflix? And as I said, because it's not actually about the special, it's about Netflix culture. It's about the conversation about making sure that you have really great representation in your content to represent different types of lives. It's very simple to me what I would do differently. So first and foremost, I think that Ted Sarandos's first point of kind of saying that, Netflix employees not all Netflix employees understand comedy, or not all Netflix employees understand the dynamics of a business. I think that was just erroneous, right? I think that, when I think about the email I would send to my employees when I've done something that's offended them, it would be, a couple sentences. It would say something like, "Hi, I obviously messed up. We're going to schedule a time for us to have a conversation so that we can dynamically have this conversation so I can listen to your points and ensure that I am thinking about those points," right? And then let's assume that conversation, that town hall thing happened or whatever. Maybe the next point after that is simply to say, we obviously are committed to creative freedom, but we obviously can also think more strategically about how we seed media. We can think more strategically about how we think about the content that we represent. Because to be truthful, a lot of the things that were in that special were factually incorrect, right? And the thing is someone can have their opinion, but facts matter. It's just as important to tag misinformation when it's on Twitter and Facebook as it is when it's on Netflix, right? Making sure that you're very responsible in the content that exists there, because you do not want people to go out in the world spouting that information. And so on one hand, obviously, one of the things that, Ted Sarandos also said is that he did not believe that violence in content creates violence in real life. And every piece of data actually disputes that particular fact. I mean, it's also the simple fact of why you have rated G and PG-13 and rated R, because we have already specifically determined that certain types of content should not be for certain types of people. So to say that a piece of content cannot actually incite violence or some kind of action on the other side of it is an incorrect statement. And so making sure that you don't say things like that because they're factually incorrect. And I think the other thing about it is that this is also a really good business decision, right? And I think that's one of the things that many people didn't understand about this conversation. One of the demands from TransStar was that both above the line and below the line individuals start to be recruited who are from trans experiences, right? Just like if you were Black, you say from Black experience. If you're Latinx, you say from Latinx experiences. And it's not simply because you're giving a handout, right? It's because those are new stories. The only thing that's going to differentiate Netflix from Disney, from Warner, from all these other companies is great content. And the one differentiator that Netflix potentially has that other people can't have is that they actually have an entire swath of humans who are actually here, who are actually interested in this content, right? Who are interested in helping tell these stories. And so for me, I think one of the biggest things that I really took away from that conversation is that I have to be a better business person, right? Because if these companies who are supposed to be multi-billion-dollar companies can't even see the writing on the wall, which is that you become obsolete when you make it much more difficult for people to be a part of the process, then I definitely have a really great business opportunity over here, and I can support a whole bunch of other organizations. Because, again, what's the harm in recruiting hundreds of people of diverse backgrounds to come work for you to help shape your content for the next decade or 20 years or 50 years or 100 years. And so you can finally make sure that you differentiate yourself from every other competitor that you have on the market. So happy you tuned in today, folks. If you liked what you saw, please like, subscribe, or click the notification bell so you can get my content every day.